The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 9th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This and all subsequent webinars will be available on makara.us under its own subheading, as shown here. Okay, we start this month with a brand new section called The Rites of Mithras. But before we get started on the text, I want to point out that there's a huge difference between studying the Druids and studying Mithraism. For though our knowledge of the habits of their daily lives are in both cases limited, the tenets of Zoroastrianism, the source of Mithraism, were written down. So unlike with the Druids, we have a record of the Mithraic belief system. The main Zoroastrian sacred text is called the Avesta. Within the Avesta are the Gathas, 17 hymns which were probably composed by Zarathustra, the prophet of Zoroastrianism. The Gathas, kind of like the Christian New Testament, form the core of the Zoroastrian liturgy. From what I've read, original Zoroastrianism was definitely an expression of the ancient wisdom teachings. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Michael, can you read that, please?
Okay. In this revelation, the Supreme Being is called Boundless Time, Sarvana Akarana, because to him no beginning can be assigned. He is so surrounded by his own glory and so exalted beyond all human comprehension that he can only be the object of silent veneration. The beginning of creation was made by means of emanations. The first emanation of the Eternal One was light, whence issued Ormuzd Ahura-Mazda, the King of Light. Ormuzd is styled the firstborn of boundless time, and the furor of him, or pre-existing soul, type or idea in Platonic phrase, had existed from all eternity within the primitive light. By means of his word, Ormuzd created the pure world, of which he is the preserver and the judge. Next, he created in his own image the 6 Amshaspans, who stand about his throne, and are his agents with the lower spirits, and with mankind, whose prayers they offer up to him, and to whom they serve for models of perfection. These Amshaspans, of whom Ormuzd is the first, thus make up the mystic number 7.
So we have the Absolute in the form of the Eternal One, or boundless time. 2, the birth of light, from whence issued the King of Light. This is right out of the 3rd stanza of Zon. In fact, a lot of this should be familiar to those of you who are doing the secret doctrine with me. The Oversoul, the creative word or logos, and finally an equivalent to what sounds like the 6 Buddhas of activity, or Kumaras, with Sanat Kumara making up the synthesizing 7th. Sanat Kumara, Ormuzd, Ahura Mazda. A lot of similar terminology, a lot of similar ideas to other forms of the ancient wisdom teachings. So Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, which was his original name in Persian, was Ahura Mazda's prophet. As mentioned before, the Gathas were hymns written by Zarathustra to Ahura Mazda, which literally means God of wisdom. Here's a couple of verses. Could we get a reader for this?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
All right. The earth. 1. O maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the first place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon one of the faithful steps forward, O Spitama Zarathustra, with a holy wood in his hand, the barisma in his hand, the holy meat in his hand, the holy mortar in his hand, fulfilling the law with love and beseeching aloud Mithra, the Lord of wide pastures. 2. O maker of the material world, thou Holy One, which is the second place where the earth feels most happy? Ahura Mazda answered, it is the place whereon one of the faithful erects a house with a priest within, with cattle, with a wife, with children, and good herds within, and wherein afterwards the cattle go on thriving. Holiness is thriving, fodder is thriving, the dog is thriving, the wife is thriving, the child is thriving, the fire is thriving, and every blessing of life is thriving.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions about this? Interesting, isn't it? Okay, with that bit of intro on the Persian source of Mithraism, let's get to MPH's text. Can we get a reader for this short first paragraph?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
When the Persian mysteries immigrated into southern Europe, they were quickly assimilated by the Latin mind. The cult grew rapidly, especially among the Roman soldiery, and during the Roman wars of conquest, the teachings were carried by the legionnaires to nearly all parts of Europe. So powerful did the cult of Mithras become that at least one Roman emperor was initiated into the order, which met in the caverns under the city of Rome.
So according to Plutarch, Mithraism first made its appearance in Italy by means of Cilician pirates. And when those pirates became colonists and slaves throughout the Roman Empire, they propagated the new religion amongst their conquerors. Must have been a compelling belief system because it spread like wildfire. In just a couple of hundred years, it superseded pretty much all other religious beliefs in Southern Europe. In fact, it eventually made its way all throughout Europe. Even Pliny the Elder seems to have accepted Mithraism, and he was a notorious skeptic, as being, according to one of his contemporaries, the only religion able to satisfy his rational philosophic approach. At the same time that Mithraism was making inroads in Italy, worship of the Egyptian/Greek Serapis was growing, which may partly account for the ubiquitous image of Mithras as bull slayer. We'll see more images of that later, but you can see it on the lower right. Okay, next up, can we get a reader for this, please?
Lorraine, can you read that for us, please?
Are you there, Lorraine? Maybe self-muted?
No, she's not self-muted, but let's move on. Carrie, can you read that for us? And I hope I unmuted the right Carrie. There's two of you.
Yes, you did.
Good.
Concerning the spread of this mystery school through different parts of Europe, C.W. King in his Gnostics and Their Remains says, Mithraic bas-reliefs cut on the faces of rocks or on stone tablets still abound in the countries formerly the western provinces of the Roman Empire. Many exist in Germany, still more in France, and in this island, Britain, they have often been discovered on the line of Picts' wall and the noted one at Bath.
Have you been to Picts' wall, Carrie?
No, I've been to the one in Bath, but not the Picts' wall, no.
Okay. Well, here's a picture of it. It was also known as Hadrian's Wall. It was a defensive barrier that stood between the Romans to the south and the Druid-led Celts to the north. The quote from Reverend King, that Carrie just read, cited by MPH, goes on, and it's worth finishing. Carrie, since you had a short read, why don't you continue it?
Inasmuch as the sun god was the chief deity of the Druids, it is easy to imagine what ready acceptance the worship of his more refined Persian equivalent would find among the Celtic Aborigines, when once introduced by the Roman troops and colonists, many of whom were Orientals.
Thanks. Okay, the use of the lion as a symbol for triumph was ubiquitous in Roman times throughout the Roman Empire, including up north in Celtic England, Britain, as illustrated by the fact that the Emperor Commodus chose to be sculpted in the lion's skin garb of Hercules, thereby underscoring the connection between Mithraic initiates who became lion-headed through initiation, you have that figure in the lower middle, and the cult of Hercules, whose lion skin indicates his mastery over the lower self. I find the top middle figure especially illustrative of this mastery. Okay. Next up, can we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Alexander Wilder, in his Philosophy and Ethics of the Zoroasters, states that Mithras is the Zend title for the sun, and he is supposed to dwell within that shining orb. Mithras has a male and a female aspect, though not himself androgynous. As Mithras, he is the Ford of the sun, powerful and radiant, and most magnificent of the Yasatas, Izads or genii of the sun. As Mithra, this deity represents the feminine principle. The mundane universe is recognized as her symbol. She represents nature as receptive and terrestrial, and is fruitful only when bathed in the glory of the solar orb. The Mithraic cult is a simplification of the more elaborate teachings of Zarathustra, Zoroaster, the Persian fire magician.
Thanks, Martha. Yeah, that's actually supposed to be Lord of the Sun. I missed that misprint there. So here's an image of the Persian as opposed to the exported Mediterranean Mithras, who, supreme among the Yasatas, is Lord of the Sun, or more esoterically, the outer solar vehicle of the inner spiritual sun, which was more the role of Ahura Mazda or Ormuzd. Could we get a reader for this section?
Stephen, can you read that for us, please? Okay, I'm not getting anything there. Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Another reformation which Zoroaster is said to have introduced was the building of temples, for before his time the altars were all erected upon hills and high places in the open air. Upon those the sacred fire was kept burning, but to which they denied that they offered adoration, but only to God in the fire. It is said that Zoroaster pretended to have been taken up into heaven and to have heard God speak from the midst of a flame of fire, that therefore fire is the truest Shekinah of the divine presence, and that the sun is the most perfect fire, for which reason he ordered them to direct their worship towards the sun, which they called Mithra. He pretended to have brought fire from heaven along with him, which was never permitted to go out. It was fed with clean wood, and it was deemed a great crime to blow upon it. or to rekindle it except from the sun or the sacred fire in some other temple.
Thank
And
you.
yeah,
Yeah. Anacalypse.
this and
Okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a moment. Academics like Godfrey Higgins, who is in so many ways, a fabulous source, often make statements like, it is said that Zoroaster pretended to have been taken up into heaven, and he pretended to have brought fire from heaven along with him. Such academics often see religious texts as a form of archaeology, as socioeconomic artifacts to be studied in order to shed light on some bygone culture, rather than as a revelatory source of the ancient wisdom teachings given to humanity by an avatar who has transcended the human condition. This archaeological bias is wordlessly saying it's all made up. An interesting but ultimately fabricated system to help ancient societies cope. I find it particularly offensive when such a one as Zarathustra is accused of, quote, pretending, which is just a soft word for lying, as if such a one as Zarathustra would make up the foundational transcendent experience of bringing fire from the higher realms. Suggesting this insinuates that the whole of Zoroastrianism is based on a sham. In truth, spiritual doctrines are given and evolve as a result of the vision of some seer, and usually devolve as a result of interference by the institutions that initially espouse that doctrine, but who then change it to suit their needs, as was the case with the Council of Nicaea, which distorted the original Christian message. So now give me a minute to put my soapbox back under my desk.
Okay, and while you do that, you have a hand up, so.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Martha.
Francis, I'm on your side with the soapbox, yay.
Yeah.
The Shekinah, the word Shekinah, I've never seen that word except in Jewish tradition.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
And it has a feminine. Well, some of
Well,
it.
it's feminine because it's a form aspect. It's the, let's see, where is that? I'm going back up. That was in this previous.
Right, it says the truest presence of the Shekinah, of the divine presence. So the dwelling, but
yeah.
I think it doesn't mean a temple. I think it means an inner light, I think. But
right, it's like the outer fire is the Shekinah of the God that dwells in the fire, right? It's very much like the point in the center of the circle being the form aspect.
Oh, so sometimes it can become, it's called the veil or tent sometimes. I get it. I see the outer, just see it as the outer expression. All right, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It's very much like the Shekinah of the trees of life, of the tree of life, right? The 10 stations, or Sephiroth, they're also called, which are just stations where this energy resides, you could say.
So Sephiroth and Shekinah have a relationship? They're related words?
Well, now I can't say that they're culturally related, because the Sephiroth is very specific to that group of 10 that represents the tree of life. And Shekinah, I think, is a more general term representing the form aspect of ... Right?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I do think they're related. Okay, so here we are back here. At any rate, a key and very Christ-like quality of Mithras was the fact that he embodied the soul aspect, as we'll discover in this reading. We get a.
Yeah.
By the way,
Joe?
this image is sort of alternately called Ahura Mazda and this soul aspect called Frohar. And, I found all different titles for this same picture. And of course, they're related. So I didn't title it for that reason.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Before, Joe, I'd like you to read, please, if you can, Joe W. But before that, Karsten has typed a message in here. He says the Shekinah is the same as the Holy Ghost, Pleiades, Ray 3, Binah in the Tree of Life.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Again, the feminine aspect, that which carries the let's see, what would you call it in Hinduism? Name escapes me. But it's the feminine aspect, the form aspect. Yeah, thanks for that. Bina. Okay, reader, please.
Through the Frohars, says the hymn, the divine being upholds the sky, supports the earth, and keeps pure and vivific the waters of pre-existent life. They are the energies in all things, and each of them, led by Mithras, is associated in its time and order with a human body. Everything, therefore, which is created or will be created, has its Frohar, which contains the cause and reason of its existence. They are stationed everywhere to keep the universe in order and to protect it against all the potencies of evil. Thus, they are allied to everything in nature. They are ancestral spirits and guardian angels, attracting all human beings to the right and seeking to avert from them every deadly peril. They are the immortal souls living before our birth as human beings and surviving after death. Thus, in the Mazdian philosophy, the eternal world is an ocean of living intelligences, a milky sea of very life, or should that be every life, from which all mortals are generated, sustained, and afforded purification from evil.
Yeah, good catch. I think that is every life. So key in this description are these two sentences. Everything, therefore, which is created or will be created has its Frohar, which contains the cause and reason of its existence. So esoteric. You really can't get much more esoteric than that. And they are the immortal souls living before our births as human beings and surviving after death. The Christ-like quality of Mithras is brought out by this statement. They are the energies in all things, and each of them, led by Mithras, is associated in its time and order with a human body. And, in this sense, you can see the office of the Christ and Mithras are very similar, right? Many have made that comparison, as a solar deity. Any thoughts or comments about this juicy paragraph? Okay. Back to the text. By the way, the term Zend, which you see in bold there, refers to a particular commentary on the original Avesta text, giving us the Zend Avesta. So Mithras is the Zen title of the sun, just means that Mithras, as the name of the sun, only appears in the commentaries, not in the Avesta itself. There's an interesting reference in the Gnostics and the Remains about the feminine aspect of Mithras. Could we get a reader for this section?
Frida, can you read that for us? You're self-muted. You're still self-muted. Okay, let me go on to somebody else.
Is Lorraine back yet? She's a good reader.
Yeah. Lorraine, are you back yet? Can you read for us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry about that. I had to step away earlier. The fires, the planets, and the genie presiding over them are in number 7, a numeral, the most sacred of all amongst the Persians. But of these 7 fires, 3 are ever depicted in a special manner as those most worthy to be held in reverence. These 3 are the fire of the stars, that is, of the planet Venus, named Anahid, the fire of the sun, or the fire Mir, and the fire of lightning, or the fire Bersiov, that is, the planet Jupiter. The Mir is the winged orb, so common in all Assyrian sculpture, an emblem which serves to explain the prophet's simile, the sun of righteousness with healing in his wings. The worship of the fire Gushtas, or that of Anahid, figures on the Zen sculptures as a very ancient worship, and also in the Shah Name, not sure how to pronounce that, just as that of the goddess Anytus does in many Greek authors from Herodotus downwards. This historian observes that at first, the Persians worshipped only the sun, moon, and elements, until they learned from the Assyrians the worship of Venus Urania, whom they called Mitra, the same being the Melita of the Babylonians, the Alata or Alilat of the Arabians. Now Mitra, feminine of Mithras, and Anahid are one and the same goddess, that is to say, the morning star, a female genius, presiding over love, giving light, and directing the harmonious movement of the other planets by the sound of her lyre, the strings whereof are the solar rays, Apollo's lyre strung with his golden hair. In this doctrine, we discover the reason for the separation of the fires upon Caelus gem into 2 groups, the principal group consisting of the 3 most anciently adored, the subsidiary 1 of the remaining 4.
As is always the case. Any thoughts or questions? So, in Mithras, as in all creator gods, we have a masculine, feminine, though, he's not in himself androgynous, but in terms of its aspects, the sun and Venus. Composite sometimes distinguished by the spelling, Mithras for the masculine form and Mitra for the feminine. It's interesting to note that the Hindu word for the primordial womb that precedes all existence is Methra. As to Caelus's gem, which is in bold here, in 1759, the author Lecomte Anne-Claude Philippe Caelus published a stunningly illustrated 7-volume set called Recueils d'antiques égyptiennes à crus grecs et romains, pardon my French, which features analyses and illustrations of the art and antiquities from the countries bordering the Mediterranean. Caelus's gems refers to small carvings, mainly of jasper and chalcedony, some quite esoterically symbolic, which are illustrated and described in these 7 volumes. Due to the miracle of the internet, you can literally download these volumes and peruse them. It's amazing. We'll take a look at this particular Mithraic gem a bit later. Okay, next up, a reader, please.
Anne Veronica, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
One moment, please. According to the Persians, there coexisted in eternity 2 principles. The first of these, Ahura Mazda or Ormuzd, was the spirit of good. From Ormuzd came forth a number of hierarchies of good and beautiful spirits, angels and archangels. The second of these eternally existing principles were called Ahriman. He was alone a pure and beautiful spirit, but he later rebelled against Ormuzd, being jealous of his power. This did not occur, however, until after Ormuzd had created light, for previously Ahriman had not been conscious of the existence of Ormuzd. Because of his jealousy and rebellion, Ahriman became the spirit of evil. For himself, he individualized a host of destructive creatures to injure Osmond.
Okay, so whenever you have jealousy and rebellion among the gods, it's always a metaphor. That's a very exoteric reading. You know, the Greek gods were famous for having human emotions, right? But it hides or veils a more metaphysical meaning. Here are a couple of images of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. In the image on the left, he is defeating Ahriman in the form of a lion, as you know, which is used in theosophy to symbolize animal man, and alternately the Leonian integrated personality. I find it interesting that Ahura Mazda in this illustration is stabbing Ahriman simultaneously in the abdomen and in the head, also very specifically geometrically, whereas Ahriman has his paw on Ahura Mazda's heart. To me, the style of this image seems somehow more initiatory than destructive. There's no struggle being shown here, right? I mean, that could be the style of the Babylonians, but it seems to me a double message, as though Ahura Mazda is redirecting the energies of Ahriman, which is, of course, our own lower nature. And then you have Ahura Mazda on the right. Here's a fanciful image of Ahriman, possibly being repelled by a mantram. You can see the profile of Ahura Mazda in the back left of this composition. Of course, this was done centuries after the time of Mithraism was extant all through Europe.
Francis?
Okay, yeah.
Scott's got his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
If you go back to the previous picture, yeah. The other thing I noticed about Ahriman here is, one, he has a tail of a scorpion or snake. And I'm wondering if he's actually being stabbed in the head or if he's not grabbing a unicorn horn.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Lion and the unicorn being one of those combinations, but I don't know. But
yeah,
because he's winged as well, so you're dealing here again with all of the fixed signs.
Indeed. That's
anyway.
You know, the deity interfacing a composite of the fixed signs.
Anne Veronica agrees with you, Scott. She says it doesn't look like a stab, but as a horn like a unicorn, and he is holding it. So two great thoughts thinking alike.
It may be,
right. If you look right where that object enters the head, you know, it looks like it's actually coming out of the head. I think you're right there. Good catch.
And I'm wondering if, the Taurus aspect may be that horn. The wings would be, the wings and the tail could be Scorpio. The lion, obviously, Leo. And sometimes they cut out the Aquarian as the highest of the four, and that's the human side. So that may be three of them here together versus one in Ahura Mazda as Aquarius, conquering for the three, perhaps. But noticing, as you say, the lion has his foot on the arm, the heart, and the knee.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There's some Masonic stuff going on here, perhaps.
It seems like it, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that, Scott. It's useful. Sure. Okay, up next. We get a reader for this paragraph.
Hold on a minute. Anne Veronica has her hand up. Go ahead, Anne Veronica.
Yes, can you go please to the, okay. He's been stabbed, but with the lower hand, where we have the solar plexus, I guess, And I was reading about Leo today, and in Master Decay says there are two things that people feel that purify, and the one is water, and the other is fire. And one of the fire signs is Leo.
Right.
And we are talking all this time, as I saw all the readings, that we are talking about water and fire, about these two elements that purify. And Master Decay was making these triangles, the fire triangles and the water triangles. It looks like it as if it's the lower personality that is been ruled by Mazda, Ahur Mazda.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no matter how you read it, it seems like that's the interface going on. I mean, this is not a battle, you know, there's...
No, it's not a battle. It doesn't seem like a battle. It seems that the right figure is overpowering, but the lion is accepting. And I was also thinking that the knee has to do with Capricorn. The heart, the opening of the heart when you become an initiate. And the hand, that means that you start giving and you give service. It's all there.
Yeah. And, you know, also the unicorn is connected with Capricorn too. That's the two horns becoming one, right? The goat becoming unicorn. And also the wings, you know, you have the Aquarian as air sign. So you have that option too. As the fourth representation of the fourth sign. Yeah, I think we're as a group onto something here, and you know, of course, now that it's revealed itself as esoteric, it would definitely be fruitful to look closer and think about it more. But yeah, good catch on all of that.
And we have a couple more comments. Martha says, then does the human advance as likened to the cardinal cross when it vanquishes what is symbolic of the fixed cross?
Yeah, I agree. It's like the interface between them, where the lower aspect, indicated by his left arm stabbing, you know, somewhere in the lower centers. It seems a bit low for the, you know, for the solar plexus, but, you know, it's hard to say. Certainly, you know, between all those centers, sacral, solar plexus. Of course, which is a metaphor for one must die to the lower self in order to mount the cardinal cross. Yeah, good work.
Martha says the story of initiation, and then Karsten says pretty much the same thing. Martha says it's the story of initiation. She adds that, and then Karsten says pretty much the same thing. He says, what about if it's the first initiation, lion, the heart, the knee, Capricorn?
Yeah, it could be read that way. You know, the integrated personality, which must leave forever behind the lesser personality orientation, right? And then you could see the right arm as stimulating the head center too. You know, you could probably make a case for it also being a higher initiation, and it may be. It's hard to say. You know. Anyone else?
That's it for now.
Okay. Great work, guys. All right, now we need a reader for this paragraph.
Okay, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
When Ormuzd created the earth, Ahriman entered into its grosser elements. Whenever Ormuzd did a good deed, Ahriman placed the principle of evil within it. At last, when Ormuzd created the human race, Ahriman became incarnate in the lower nature of man. so that in each personality, the spirit of good and the spirit of evil struggle for control. For 3,000 years, Ormuzd ruled the celestial worlds with light and goodness. Then he created man. For another 3,000 years, he ruled man with wisdom and integrity. Then the power of Ahriman began, and the struggle for the soul of man continues through the next period of 3,000 years. During the fourth period of 3,000 years, the power of Ahriman will be destroyed. Good will return to the world again. Evil and death will be vanquished. And at last, the spirit of evil will bow humbly before the throne of Ormuzd. While Ormuzd and Ahriman are struggling for control of the human soul and for supremacy in nature, Mithras, god of intelligence, stands as mediator between the two. Many authors have noted the similarity between Mercury and Mithras. As the chemical mercury acts as a solvent, according to alchemists, so Mithras seeks to harmonize the two celestial opposites.
It's a good paragraph. Any thoughts or questions about this one?
I think the last part there about Mercury is really important. And he also takes on as a messenger like Anubis and others that go between quality.
Yeah.
That relates. And he's also a stand-in then between the sun, Ormuzd, and Venus. There's your trinity and the movement between the two directly seen.
Yeah, I agree. It's that two aspects of Mercury, and one of them is he's called the house of the sun or the vehicle of the sun. If we go back, remember that I don't want to go back because it's, well, you know what? I don't like to be so helpless. See, that's number 40. Let's go back up here. Yeah, remember this one, this is very much like, the chariot of the sun idea, right? Which is different than the spirit of the sun itself. This suggests that the vehicle of the sun, whereas Ahura Mazda is the central spiritual aspect, right? Okay. Back to play. Any other thoughts about this paragraph? Interesting, you always have to take these periods of time, 3,000 years, it's like you probably want to add a few ciphers there if you want to get anywhere near accurate. But together they add to 12,000, which 12 is a cosmic number of completion. If you read it backwards, it's the that form aspect represented by all the zeros, all that happens in those many zeros, then coming into the 2, which then comes into the 1. And 12-petaled lotus is the number of petals of the heart. It's also the number of petals of the solar logos. This is a solar deity, so as expressed on this planet. So you can see the time cycles are definitely related to the nature of the solar deity. Okay, Godfrey Higgins, who I was just railing against a moment ago, right, about his pretending, use of the word pretending. But he gave us the Celtic Druids, which we quoted extensively during the section on the Druids. That was one of the best sources. Well, he also wrote the massive 2-volume Anacalypsis, his magnum opus, whose subtitle is An Attempt to Draw Aside the Veil of the Saitic Isis, or an inquiry into the origins of languages, nations, and religions. Saitic means related to Sais, which is a city in ancient Egypt. From Anacalypsis, we'll gain further insight into Ahriman, as well as the trinity of principles to be found in well, basically in every religion.
Francis.
Yeah.
Okay, two things. Anne Veronica says Calypsis is the Greek word for discovery.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
And then,
yeah,
going back to our previous, Karsten says, I'm missing Lucifer. You know, Steiner talks away about the fight in the man between Lucifer and Ahriman.
Oh, interesting. That would be interesting to know. Yeah, it makes sense. In a sense, Prometheus and Lucifer came in to defeat the form aspect by implanting the fire of mind, through procreation. That was a great sacrifice, right? So I'd be fascinated to hear, especially Steiner, what he says about that. That's great. If you have any specific reference, like if you can point to a book and page number and put it in the chat box, I'd be very interested in knowing the source of that information. Okay. So, reader, please.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. The first dogma of the religion of Zoroaster clearly was the existence of one supreme, omnipotent God. In this, it not only coincides with the Hindu and the Christian, but with all other religions. In this, therefore, there is not anything particular, but on further inquiry, it appears that this great first cause, called Ormuzd or Oromazdus, was a being like the gods of the Hindus and of the Christians, consisting of three persons. The triplicate deity of the Hindus, of three persons on one god, Brahma the creator, Vishnu or Krishna, the savior or preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. And yet, this was all one god in his different capacities. In the same manner, the supreme god of the Persians consisted of three persons: Oromazdus, the creator, Mithra, the savior, mediator or preserver, and Ahriman, the destroyer. And indeed, from that which Plutarch affirms, the Persian god Mithras, called mediator, was more properly the middle hypostasis of that triplicated deity of theirs, rather than a middle self-existent god or mediator betwixt the two adversary gods, one good and the other evil.
Thanks, Carrie. Hypostasis just means underlying cause or source. So I found this final sentence statement particularly insightful. It may be more reasonably concluded that Mithras was properly the middle hypostasis of their triplicated deity rather than a middle self-existent God. It's very Hegelian to consider Mithras as almost like a mathematical function, an energetic mediator rather than as a persona. Of course, in truth, the idea of a God being a persona is in our imaginations quite it's not accurate, right? It's really more a combination. You could call it a nexus of energy that could be personified, right? Okay.
Francis, I just wanted to tell you that Karsten sent a website for you, and I copied that over and I sent it out to everyone else if they're interested in looking for it. And of course, you'll see it when I send you the chat log.
Oh, that's great. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing what Steiner has to say about that. So this quote from the Gnostics and Their Remains hints at the truth behind the Ahriman concept. By the way, it might take you a minute to make out the composition of this painting. It did me, anyway. It's called Ahriman being slain by Faramars during a scene from the Shahnameh. Do you see him there? He's up above. You can locate Ahriman by the two white eyes, and then the little horns above them. And then Faramars is a heroic figure in black and gold there. So a reader, please.
Oops. Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Ahriman being slain by Faramaz during the scene from Shahnameh. The Zoroastrian hell, a burning lake of molten metal into which on the judgment day Ahriman with his followers were to be cast, had for its object the ultimate purification and restoration to their pristine state of the condemned, a merciful doctrine held by Origen and partly allowed by Jerome. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. It was so preferred to eternal damnation, right? And obviously much more esoterically in line with the ancient wisdom teachings that basically all form is, the purpose is purification and restoration, right? So, okay, next up.
You've got Scott's hand up. Hold on. Go ahead, Scott.
I think what's being pointed out here too is the multiple cycles here we're dealing with at different levels of Ormuzd or Ahriman being defeated here in this case. That could be applied on a previous one of the 3,000 years, but simply each season of the year. It's an annual cycle.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And this is something we deal with on a personal level at any particular, so many cycles of that fourness, of this cycle within us, within a year, within, this sort of cycle here where Judgment Day.
Right, a cosmological, yeah.
Yeah, so at different levels you apply the same cycle, the 4 points of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in such a case, then, he's indicating that the last cycle is the resurrection, right? The way we have our calendar year, it sort of ends, at the winter cycle, but we do have within that the return of the sun, which right, the resurrection, just inside the yearly, right? So yeah, that's a good point.
Martha,
by the way, go ahead.
Sorry, Martha adds, and she's got her hand up too. Hold on a minute, Martha. She says, sounds like purgatory in Christian teachings, a la Origen and Jerome. Fathers were always in the discussion in the early days of the church.
Yeah, what's the true purpose of that? Yeah. I've always felt that purgatory was a much more realistic understanding of the process than hell, which has such an absolute irredeemable quality to it.
That's what's so exciting about this study, Francis, because in many ways, at least at Columbia, in comparative religion, it was all external. It was all about language. It would be a lot more in the tone of Godfrey Higgins. But when you look at this from the standpoint of spirituality, the dynamics of science and civil nation building and religious the essence of religious understanding converge. And so this is just it's a simple illustration, but it also speaks to the growth in psychological awareness of humanity, because in some ways, all this amazing history is unfolding, the psychology of the person is also developing. And so there's an awareness from a psychological perspective of, if you create finality, there's nowhere to go. So this notion of what I understand was offered by Anne Veronica, I think, who talked about Steiner, is this trying to build in a level of complexity that is consistent with the history unfolding. So I hope I'm being clear, but it's very exciting that there's an integral approach going on here. And so Origen was I think he was ultimately cast away as a Gnostic, but Jerome ended up kind of adhering to the party line in a way. So it's just very interesting. I'm sometimes looking at this from the political side, if that makes sense, but thank you.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And as you were saying, the psychological is so often the missing element in exoteric doctrine. And of course, it's the essential one, which is this this path back, right, within one's own process, right? I mean, the Christian offers, John 3:16 as a way of making it back to heaven, right? You sign this contract, you accept, but it doesn't really describe the true way, Did I hear somebody trying to speak there? Okay, let's go on. Next.
Okay, right before we go on, Anne Veronica says hypostasis is a Greek word, existence. And what you said also, it's a double word, the substance, the essence that underlies.
Yes, well, that would be, existence itself is a funny word, because what's the first two letters? X, which suggests outer. There should be a word X is in instance, right? That would be more like hypostasis, I think. It's interesting. What did Anne Veronica? Could you break down the two syllables, hypo and stasis? Is there a further meaning to those?
Hello. Hypo means to be under. I was trying now to send to a teacher that is a Greek language teacher to ask her why the meaning of the meaning of this word, but hypostasis means what underlies.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And of course, in esoteric philosophy, that's going to be the formless essence, right?
Yes.
And so in that particular reference, when it refers to Mithras, it was suggesting, in that context, it was suggesting that that bridging energy between the polarity of Ahriman and Ahura Mazda, right? Though it says elsewhere, that he's very much the form aspect of the solar reality. It's the chariot, not the inner spirit. So, but then, the chariot itself is very mercurial, the messenger of the gods, right? Okay.
Yes.
If there's nothing else, we can move on.
No, it's okay, Ronnie.
Thank you, by the way. That was quite interesting.
Thank you.
Okay, reader.
Anne Veronica, can you read this for us, please?
Yes. There are many points of resemblance between Christianity and the cult of Mithras. One of the reasons of this probably is that the Persian mystics invaded Italy during the 1st century after Christ, and the early history of both cults was closely interwoven. The Encyclopedia Britannica makes the following statement concerning the Mithraic and Christian mysteries. The fraternal and democratic spirit of the first communities and their humble origin, the identification of the objects of adoration with light and the sun, the legends of the shepherds with the gifts and adoration, the flood and the ark, the representation in art of the fiery chariot, the drawing of water from the rock, the use of bell and candle, holy water and the communion, the sanctification of Sunday and of the 25th of December, the insistence on moral conduct, the emphasis placed on abstinence and self-control, the doctrine of heaven and hell, of primitive revelation, of the mediation of the Logos emanating from the divine, the atoning sacrifice, the constant warfare between good and evil, and the final triumph of the former, the immortality of the soul, the last judgment, the resurrection of the flesh, and the fiery destruction of the universe. These are some of the resemblances which, whether real or only apparent, enable Mithraism to prolong its resistance of Christianity.
It should be to Christianity. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Now, before you mute me, I would like to say one word more. Mitra, which is the female of Mithras, in Greek, it means the womb.
Well, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
And also the priests, the higher priests in the Christian church, he wears a hat on top, which we call the mitra.
The mitra. Ah, yeah. Right.
I don't know if there is a connection, but they are said the same, and I have to look why they are called that way, and I'll have to ask. But mitra in Greek means womb.
It's interesting. And if you remember, I mentioned that Mithra in Hindu language is that womb that precedes manifestation. It's the great mother that from which all issues forth, right? So yeah, we clearly.
So Mithraism could be said that it has to do with what comes from the womb of the universe. Could we say something like that?
Yes. I see a hand up. Maybe they have.
Yeah, it's Martha. Go ahead, Martha. You're self-muted.
I hope I'm not talking too much. This is just so brilliant. What's coming up for me is that what I see here is in this period, instead of focusing, the Christians focused on the life of Jesus and the gospel, but when you talk about the fathers of the church, what they were struggling with was the notion of who mediates. So when we speak about Mithras as mediator, or it brings to mind Hierophant, there's a subtle, and I suppose it's more psychological than anything, but there's a subtle trending here towards shifting to this notion of the mediator in the community. Where the church went wrong, in my opinion, is that it was in this period, it was really attempt prior to the 6th century, it was really trying to almost democratize the mystery schools, to open them up to some way that would be more universal, which was what Jesus of the Christ was attempting to do, was to promote universal love. The challenge and the problem was the historical challenges of empire building that was also necessary for humanity's evolution. So it was a conundrum between this empire building and this deeper energetic resonance with some ultimate reality that these early traditions had. So I just wanted to highlight the integral nature of what we're doing. I hope. Thank you. And I try not to talk too much.
Yes, indeed. And, if you bring in the Gnostic school, which we'll be looking into too, you see just this broad dissemination of similar esoteric values and teachings that have much more in common than than differences. Here's a half a dozen images that show the similarities between Christian and Mithraism, and you could have you could extend this photo essay to include other forms, other spiritual forms, but this one are just these two.
Francis?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Carrie says the etymology of mitre, however you say it, it's a piece of armor.
Well, yes, I think that's pretty exoteric, actually. Okay. I'm not sure what to do with that. Any insights on that, Carrie, as to what that might represent within the esoteric framework?
No, I just looked it up. So it's purely exoteric, yes.
Yeah, I think so. You have cardinals who wear mitres, and as if it's a symbol of that which connects deity to the form aspect, you can see why they called it the mitre. Getting that term probably from way back, right?
Martha, you're self-muted. Do you have any insight on that? I see your hand up.
Just wanted to suggest that the armor might represent the mitre, might represent the duality between good and evil, which is, remember, the church got embedded in the sixth ray, and
right.
that the
Christian
the pre-Christian energy was attempting to, wasn't about that so much. So the armor just might be good, either or type of thinking that often exists in moral teaching.
Right. Yes, if you're on a crusade and you believe that the Saracens are the embodiment of evil,
Exactly. And that in some ways it's well served that the etymology of the mitre be understood. It would be, because even the forms within the church apparently seem to be changing. You don't see the Pope walking with that anymore. It used to, even when I was a child, that was was shown, and they're not doing that anymore.
Interesting.
Francis,
yeah.
If you look at the shape of the bishop's mitre or hat, it resembles a fish's mouth.
Yes, that's true. In fact, very specifically at the top, where they have that, it's not it's kind of open and doubled there at the top, and you have just like an open fish's mouth.
And so that brings in the Piscean age image.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, a lot of symbolism there. Okay. So next up, can we get a reader for this paragraph?
Michael, can you read that, please?
Yes. The rites of Mithras were performed in caves. Porphyry, in his Cave of the Nymphs, states that Zarathustra, Zoroaster, was the first to consecrate a cave to the worship of God, because a cavern was symbolic of the earth, or the lower world of darkness. John P. Lundy, in his Monumental Christianity, describes the cave of Mithras as follows. But this cave was adorned with the signs of the zodiac, Cancer and Capricorn. The summer and winter solstices were chiefly conspicuous, as the gates of souls descending into this life or passing out of it in their ascent to the gods. Cancer being the gate of descent, and Capricorn of ascent. These are the two avenues of the immortals, passing up and down from earth to heaven and from heaven to earth.
Any thoughts or questions about this? You can see the appropriateness of the use of the cave as the intermediate space between these two gates, can't you? The Gnostic and the Remains describes a Mithraic cave. Can we get a reader for this one, please?
Yeah. Martha, can you read that for us, please?
A Mithraic cave with the contiguous buildings was discovered at Spoleto in 1878. In the end wall were the usual 3 niches for the god and his torchbearers. In front of them, an altar inscribed Soli Invictu Mithrae Sacrum. Close to the altar, a tall phallic stone perforated with a square hole near the top, perhaps a stone symbolizing the birth of Mithras mentioned by Firmicus. The cave with the ground plan of the whole edifice is given in the Archaeologia, volume 47, page 205, the Gnostics and their Remains.
Thanks, Martha. By the way, this is not that cave at Spoleto. I couldn't find an image of it, though I was able to verify by an exoteric source its existence. But there's a few of these caves that are still around, and they have Mithraic symbols and images, reliefs, etc. in them. So the two astrological gates, I did a painting of them many years ago. And they're, familiar to any student of theosophy, particularly DK, right? You can see there at the top, the symbol of Neptune, which represents the Cancerian gate, and then in the distant, the symbol of Saturn represents the Capricornian gate. And then the figure about to enter, the figure at the center, and the figure beyond representing the initiates, tiny, beyond the far gate. So can we get a reader for this DK quote?
Lorraine, can you read that, please? You're self-muted.
Yes.
There you go.
The two gates. The polar opposite to Capricorn is Cancer, and as you have been taught, these two signs are the two great gates of the zodiac. One opening the door into incarnation, into mass life, and into human experience, whilst the other opens the door into the life of the spirit, into the life of the kingdom of God, the life and purposes of the hierarchy of our planet. Cancer admits the soul into the world center, which we call humanity. Capricorn admits the soul into conscious participation in the life of that world center, which we call the hierarchy.
I think these teachings are probably familiar to most of you. So next up, can we get a reader?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
The so-called chair of St. Peter in Rome was believed to have been used in one of the pagan mysteries, possibly that of Mithras, in whose subterranean grottos the votaries of the Christian mysteries met in the early days of their faith. In Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins writes that in 1662, while cleaning the sacred chair of Bar Jonas, the 12 labors of Hercules were discovered upon it, and that later the French discovered upon the same chair the Mohammedan Confession of Faith written in Arabic.
Thanks, Lynn. Okay, so by the way, let's see, what's his name? Bar Jonas, isn't that it? Yeah, Bar Jonas. That was another name for Peter. So here's the over-the-top chair, both literally and stylistically, of St. Peter's, but sculpted by Bernini in 800 AD. But it seems more likely, in fact, it's impossible that this was that chair being described, that this chair, referenced by MPH, is this much older one, described simply as the old cathedra of Peter. Cathedra means raised seat or throne. The complete quote from Anacalypsis is actually worth a read. It's quite interesting. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Various miracles are recorded of St. Peter at Rome, and to support the credit of the chief of the apostles, the actual chair on which this Bar Jonas sat was formally exhibited. As Bar Jonas was holy, it followed that the chair on which he sat must also be holy. Therefore, a festival was instituted on the 18th of January to the Holy Chair, which on that day was annually exposed to the adoration of the people. This continued till the year 1662, when, upon cleaning it, in order to set it up in some conspicuous place of the Vatican, the 12 labors of Hercules unluckily appeared engraved on it. Our worship, however, says Giacomo Bartolini, who was present at this discovery and relates it, was not misplaced, since it was not to the wood we paid it, but to the principle of the apostles, St. Peter. When the French got possession of Rome, they did not fail to examine this celebrated relic, and lo, in addition to the labors of Hercules, they discovered engraved upon it in Arabic letters the Mohammedan confession of faith. In these two facts, there is a beautiful exemplification of the doctrine held by me and Ammonius Saccas, that all the varieties of religions are at the bottom the same. I can scarcely conceive of a more marked proof of the nature of the secret doctrine of the conclave. The whole tenure of this work goes to explain the labors of Hercules, the symbols, as Mr. Parkhurst calls them, of what the real Savior was to do and suffer.
Thank you, Carrie. Any thoughts about this fascinating little side story? So the, the great 18th of January festival of the chair abruptly ended when they discovered the labors of Hercules on it, I guess. Okay, onward. Yeah, I see a hand there.
Scott, go ahead.
If you go back to that chair, two things come to mind there. One is that's the same, very similar, low-backed cubical chair that every pharaoh you see in Egypt is sitting upon.
Yeah.
And the gnomon that's created there, it's more or less cubical, and also so it's Egyptian as well, and you have to figure in that has to be behind this, as well as just what comes from India and Persia.
It certainly suggests antiquity, doesn't it, in terms of design?
And also, I think of the stone of scone, right? The stone that sits under the throne. So it's not, you're not actually sitting on the stone, but it's the same idea. This rock that it comes from rock. It's from the earth into the highest rock, which is Capricornian in this case. It's not a cave, but it's Capricorn. The authority, the hierarchy.
Yeah, St. Peter's, the rock on which you build my church, right?
Yeah. And then the fact that I think it's Mithras, his father's born from a rock. Mithras was from the rock as well.
Mithras himself was born from rock, yeah. It's interesting, this chair is actually in the shape, the back of it especially, is evocative of a cathedral. And so it's like naturally the chair that Peter would sit on would be that, right? It's like a microcosm of the greater cathedral. Interesting observations. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Carrie has his hand up, and then there's some comments. Carrie, you're self-muted. There you go.
Interestingly, the coronation chair in I think it's Westminster Abbey in England, is very like this. And in the space is a rock, actually a stone called the coronation stone.
Right.
And it occurs to me that, of course, Peter is the rock.
Yeah, exactly. That's fascinating.
Yes. I wonder if you could just do a close-up of the pictures. I'm interested to see them on the front of the...
We can try.
Go back to the other view. Are those the labors of Hercules?
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
Martha asks, what's the significance that there are 18 icons in front? So there's only 12 labors of Hercules.
Of them are different, so that's why I asked, because 6 of them are in different colors. They're a little bit yellow, but maybe that's nothing.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Let me do something I don't do.
And while you're getting ready trying to do this, I just want to say, Karsten has also said, when you unfold the cube, the box, you also get a cross.
Exactly, yes. Okay, let's see what I can make of this. Because it's a little bit of magnification here. Bring it up. See what we can see. Okay. Gosh, pretty hard. See a scorpion there for sure on the bottom second to the left. A lot of figures doing different things. You know, it could be, but does anybody see enough here to, you know, unfortunately, this is an image pulled from the internet, so the resolution, it's not like, you know, when you take a picture with a high-res camera, there's an end to the resolution. And now
I think that bottom right one might be the head of a cow or a goat or something. So
the top second from the right looks like a figure in a lion.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
you're
that
right.
definitely looks like one of the Hercules ones. You can see there's a number of them that look like Hercules.
It could be
battling.
Huh. You know, so it could be that these were like painted or something, you know, painted over, and that when they cleaned it, they found these. Wouldn't that be something? Huh. Yeah,
maybe the bottom one is a hand with an apple in it for the apples of Hesperides.
Maybe so. Yeah.
We lost you.
Are you back with me?
Yeah, we can hear you almost again.
Okay, I was mumbling. I was just saying I'll try a lot of Command Z's and get my image back. Okay.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's a real possibility of that. That's them right there. Incredible.
The thing on the 18 symbols,
yeah,
not all of the labors of Hercules was just one labor. For instance, Gemini, there were 5 different labors within that one.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. That's interesting, yeah. Yeah. And it may be, you know, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12. I mean,
well, and there were 9 tests in Scorpio alone.
Right.
Martha says maybe numerology, the 1 + 8 = 9.
Well, it's a feminine number, 18. It's it's a lunar number. And, you know, which goes with the rock, goes with the physical aspect, the form anchoring aspect, right? So yeah, if there's any significance to that at all, you know, yeah. Interesting. I would love to see this. Wouldn't you just love to see this chair? See what's, because I'm sure, who knows? It could be buried in a back room of the Vatican at this point. You never know. But anyway. Okay, let's move on. This paragraph on initiation. It's a very interesting section. Can we get a reader, please?
Lynn, can you read that, please?
Initiation into the rites of Mithras, like initiation into many other ancient schools of philosophy, apparently consisted of 3 important degrees. Preparation for these degrees consisted of self-purification, the building up of the intellectual powers, and the control of the animal nature. In the first degree, the candidate was given a crown upon the point of a sword and instructed in the mysteries of Mithras' hidden power. Probably he was taught that the golden crown represented his own spiritual nature, which must be objectified and unfolded before he could truly glorify Mithras. For Mithras was his own soul, standing as mediator between Ormuzd, his spirit, and Ariham, his animal nature. In the second degree, he was given the armor of intelligence and purity and sent into the darkness of subterranean pits to fight the beasts of lust, passion, and degeneracy. In the third degree, he was given a cape on which were drawn or woven the signs of the zodiac and other astronomical symbols. After his initiations were over, he was hailed as one who had risen from the dead, was instructed in the secret teachings of the Persian mystics, and became a full-fledged member of the order. Candidates who successfully passed the Mithraic initiations were called lions and were marked upon their foreheads with the Egyptian cross. Mithras himself is often pictured with the head of a lion and 2 pairs of wings. Throughout the entire ritual were repeated references to the birth of Mithras as the sun god, his sacrifice for man, his death that men might have eternal life, and lastly, his resurrection and saving of all humanity by his intercession before the throne of Ormuzd.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. So if this is the only paragraph we had about Mithraism, so at least I would be convinced that it was one that was overshadowed by the ancient wisdom. It just has all the right elements. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph? Here's a detail, remember this, from the frontispiece for this chapter, depicting a leontocephalic, great word, or lion-headed initiate with his 2 sets of wings, which were just referenced. Remember, the title of this chapter is The Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies Which Have Influenced Modern Masonic Symbolism. As was the case among the Mithraics and the Druids, 3 main degrees make up the structure of modern Masonry. The particular details of these degrees vary from one mystery school to the next, but I would venture to say that their purpose and intended effect on the initiate is much the same. One of the keys to Mithraic initiation is described in this sentence. He was taught that the golden crown represented his own spiritual nature, which must be objectified and unfolded before he could truly glorify Mithras. In other words, he must become self-aware. For Mithras was his own soul, standing as mediator between Ormuzd, his spirit, and Ahriman, his animal nature. So, I'm drawing to mind that image we looked at of Ormuzd or Ahura Mazda and that combined figure of the lion, scorpion, and unicorn. It seems like it depicts this sentence.
Francis?
Okay. Yeah.
I found another picture of that. Yeah. I think we can see it a little better.
Great, take a look.
Hold on, let me see if I can bring it up here. I just have to be smart enough to.
Oh, yeah, look. Good for you. Huh.
There.
Yeah.
See, it's a little bit better. I'll make a copy of it and I'll send it to you. But it looks like there are 18 depictions of different portions of the Hercules labor.
Yeah.
I can't see what all of them are right now, but
Yeah.
It's interesting to note that this is now contained within that larger chair that's gold leaf. And it the last time it was displayed in public was 1867.
Wow, really? Yeah. Yeah, the church isn't real big on labors of Hercules. Huh. Thanks for that. That's really fascinating. Yeah.
Anne Veronica sent us a Stephen Huller blog spot, Jesus as Roman Demigod, part 22. I'll put that in there for everybody. Oh, she says it's a better picture. Okay, let me see if I can put that for everybody. And then I'll have to see if I can look at it. I'm working on two different computers
Okay,
right
why don't
now.
we do that? Let's do that behind the scenes. And if you actually get that shot up on your screen, we'll switch back over. But meanwhile, let's go ahead and read the next.
Okay, go ahead and take control again.
Here, go to meeting. Presenter. Okay. Alrighty. So here's a, let me find my place, folks. So the Gnostic and their remains, obviously a source I relied heavily on, gives us an inside look at this crown and sword initiation. Could we get I've got to go back out here just to collapse my side panel. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
The final ceremony he has himself explained in another passage. Quote, "Blush, my Roman fellow soldiers, even though ye be not to be judged by Christ, but by any soldier of Mithras, who when he is undergoing initiation in the cave, when the garland rather, is offered to him, a sword being placed between as though in semblance of martyrdom, and about to be set upon his head, is instructed to put forth his hand and push the crown away, transferring it perchance to his shoulder, saying at the same time, my crown is Mithras. And from that time forth he never wears a garland, and this he has for the badge of his initiation, for he is immediately known to be a soldier of Mithras. If he rejects a garland when offered to him, saying that his crown is his God."
Thank you, Scott. But there was also a more elaborate and brutal process consisting of 12 stages, which I think it's safe to say are never undergone by any modern mystery school candidate. I think it's appropriate for you to keep reading this, Scott.
It looks familiar. In the following 12 steps, we see portrayed certain amongst the tests of the neophyte's courage, which according to Sudius were termed the 12 degrees or tortures. These corresponded in nature, although of vastly more severe reality, with those trials of courage to which our Masonic lodges subject the apprentice who seeks admission amongst them. During the Mithraic probation, which lasted 40 days, the candidate was tested by the 4 elements. He lay naked a certain number of nights upon the snow, and afterwards was scourged for the space of 2 days. These 12 tortures were sculptured upon the border of the famous Mithraic tablets preserved in the Innsbruck Museum. And a brief account of their several stages will serve to elucidate much of what remains to be discussed.
I spent an hour looking for that Mithraic tablet.
Yeah.
No luck, no mention. That's just, I don't know. Go ahead.
1, man standing and about to plunge a dagger into the throat of a kneeling figure who holds up in his hands holds up his hands in supplication. This scene appears analogous to the one in the modern ceremonial when the candidate, ordered to remove the bandage from his eyes, beholds many swords pointed in the most threatening manner to his naked breast. 2, naked man lying on the earth, his head resting on his hand in the posture of repose, probably the penance of the bed of snow. 3, same figure, standing with hands uplifted in a huge crescent, perhaps an arc, representing the trial by water. To this last, Plato is reported to have been subjected during his initiation in Egypt, and to have but narrowly escaped drowning.
Go ahead.
4, the same, but now with the Pilius, cap of liberty, upon his head. I can't see what's to the right of that. Is there more?
No.
Okay, rushing boldly into a great fire, the trial by fire. 5, he is now struggling through a deep stream and endeavoring to grasp a rock. 6, bull walking to the left. On the other side come the
Let's hold there and get a new reader for these last 6.
Sure.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Martha, can you read that?
On the other side come the remaining stages. 7, 4 guests reclining at a horseshoe table, sigma, upon which is set a boar, roasted whole. 8, youth guided up a flight of interminable steps by an aged man. 9, youth kneeling before a man in a long robe whose hand he grasps in prayer. 10, the same figures, but their positions are interchanged. 11, seated man before whom kneels a naked, crowned youth, escorted by one in a long robe. 12, naked man holding up the hind legs of a cow so as to receive in his face the stream still regarded by the Hindus as the most efficient labor of regeneration, and consequently also administered to persons at their last gasp.
Always administer.
Always, thank you. The same sacred fluid, as I am informed by a Parsi, is used in the sacramental cup drunk by every male upon his first admission into that religion, which takes place on his completing his 7th year. The Gnostics in their remains.
Yeah, thank you, Martha and Scott. So clearly, the importance in the sacredness of the bull and of the cow. We've seen it before, in other indications, the stirring of the sea of milk, right, from which all propitious objects come forth, right? And also we see here that the Hindu influence coming via Persia, right? And as we're going to be getting into the Mithras's the connection with the bull. Okay, so as mentioned,
I'm sorry,
Go
you
ahead.
have a couple of comments, and I just want to say I tried using that link that Anne Veronica sent us for Stephen Hewler's blogspot, and I couldn't get to it. So anyway, it was supposedly a better picture, but okay. Karsten says, is there any connection between the Mithras, the womb, the cave, and the Hara chakra sexuality suppressed by the church?
Oh, let's see. Hey, I don't think it's a direct connection. I think the idea of the cave is a recognition of the, you could say, of the that stage between it's the form stage between the two primordial stages before you come into incarnation, after you leave. You know, for instance, when he was talking about the astrological signs and with the prominent gates of Cancer and Capricorn, suggesting that you're, you know, have entered the Capricorn, the Cancerian gate, and that through the process of life in the cave, which is life on Earth, incarnated life, one eventually progresses to the mountaintop of Capricorn. I see that's more the meaning of that. So any other questions?
And the cave relates you to the sign of Virgo.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Cave is Virgonian. And its rulers are seen as Mercury and to some degree Vulcan, I think, as well.
Vulcan through veiled by the moon. So there's another cave aspect.
And
right,
the rock,
the cave experience of Leo, the Hercules cave experience too.
Yeah, well, that would be most appropriate for Mithras with the, you know, lion-centered orientation.
Right. And then Martha asks, or she says, there is a mythological story that Mary, mother of Jesus, conceived her child by a Roman soldier, also a follower of Mithras, a sect allowed by the Romans.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? It sounds to me like a continuity story, you know. And of course, I can't think of anything that would be more violently suppressed by the church, since Mary was, you know, wedded to Joseph, unless this story suggests that a complete alternative historicity, you know, it's hard to say. Interesting though, thanks for that. Anything else?
No, I think that's it right now.
Okay. So, as mentioned, after initiation, candidates were referred to as lions. I love the baby lion on the left. It's like a first initiate, right? And of course, this references a solar lion, emblem of Leo, triply ruled by the sun, suggesting that the lion-headed candidate had become one with his solar aspect, Mithras. So fascinating to me, all the emblems of lions here. You have the lions on the knees, lions at the solar plexus, which of course is the solar center. Fascinating. And of course, you always have this, the serpents and the dogs, and you'll see how important that was to Mithraic belief as we move on. Okay, let's take a, let's see, can we do this? Yeah, let's do one of them. Let's take a look at the first of two small images that appear on page 24 of the text. By the way, Soli Invicto was the Roman name. Solus Invictus was the Roman name of the solar deity at that time, right? And it's like invincible sun. That's what it means. So can we get a reader, please?
Lorraine, can you read that for us, please?
Yes.
There you go.
The most famous sculpturings and reliefs of this protokos show Mithras kneeling upon the recumbent form of a great bull, into whose throat he is driving the sword. The slaying of the bull signifies that the rays of the sun, symbolized by the sword, release at the vernal equinox the vital essences of the earth, the blood of the bull, which, pouring forth from the wound made by the sun god, fertilize the seeds of living things. Dogs were held sacred to the cult of Mithras, being symbolic of sincerity and trustworthiness. The Mithraics used the serpent as an emblem of Ahriman, the spirit of evil, and water rats were held sacred to him. The bull is esoterically the constellation of Taurus. The serpent, its opposite in the zodiac, Scorpio. The sun, Mithras, entering into the side of the bull, slays the celestial creature and nourishes the universe with its blood.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this? This is actually a whole new section. We'll be staying with this for some time with many different images describing this. There's even now over 700 of these images that they've found describing this one scene, and it's full of wonderful metaphors. So this is where we'll pick up, and we'll get into the metaphorical meaning of this. But I do want to say one thing, which is we were just talking about, in these initiations, let's see, what does it say here? The labor of regeneration, right? It's the, after holding the hind legs of the cow so as to receive the stream, which is considered a labor of regeneration, which is also administered to them at last gasp. The same fluid is used in the sacramental cups drunk by every male at his first admission into that religion, which happens at the 7th year, right? So it marks a very important time. So you see that the carrying over of the importance of the bull and of the sacredness of this animal, so it's I think key to this is the idea that that sword represents this solar ray, right, which releases the vital essence onto the earth. So this is a very sacred event, contrary to what it looks like, which is just slaughtering a bull.
Francis.
Yeah.
What is the time period for this?
Yeah, well,
astrologically.
Oh, astrologically, yeah, it's in that 600 years that precede the birth of Christ, so 600 BCE. But that would be the Persian quality, and even before that. And I'm not sure of when Zoroastrianism was founded. It's a Wikipedia item that I need to look up.
It kind of reminds me of in the age of Aquarius, where the age of Taurus is hanging on, and they're saying, well, we need to let go of that because we're in this age now.
Right. And you get that, if you look at Apis or Apis from the Egyptians, which way earlier than this stuff, you actually get back into that possible time. A lot of Egyptian age took place in the sign of Aries, but if you go far enough back, you get to Taurus.
Quite interesting. Thank you.
Francis,
yeah.
you also have a question from Anne Veronica, and I'm not
Okay,
sure.
one thing. I just want to say this to finish the thought, which is that this form of Mithraism is much later. This is just a couple of hundred years. You know, after all, it was the pirates invading, you know, the coast, the southern coast of Europe that brought Mithraism. So it's really just, you know, a couple hundred years before the Christ and into the time of Christ. That's he mentions, you know. So yeah, Anna Veronica, go ahead.
Her question was, and I'm not sure what image she was talking to, but she says, "What is the symbol in the heart?" She said it looks like an eye.
Yeah, I know exactly which image. It's right here. Almost looks like an opened eye, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what she thought.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah. Well, you know, there was a lot of orientation around the intelligence of the heart in Egypt. That was the, you know, the meaning of the.
It looks to me like a little lion's head because you can see it. You can see it on the profile side a little better.
Uh-huh. Okay, well that would make more sense, wouldn't it? In keeping with.
But wait a minute, his chest. That's like his belly button. The eye there at the chest.
No, we're talking about his chest.
Yeah, the chest.
Right, no,
sorry.
Yeah. Right. It looks to me like an open eye, which is, you know, pretty amazing, really. You know, that's a beautiful thing. And, you know, there's a lot of association between the heart and the lion, right? I mean, you know, even in The Wizard of Oz, the lion, if he only had a heart, right? It's an age-old association. Okay, folks. I really enjoy these webinars, and thank you for participating so much and fleshing out the meaning of these images and quotes. So stay safe, stay well. Our next webinar is not going to the next Secret Teaching of All Ages. Has to be postponed until June because I don't want it in any way to conflict with the conference presentations that will be going on all through those first 10 days of May. So I urge you to check them out. It's going to be a great deal. You can to participate. There will be some tremendous speakers. And then we'll pick up again in June. I think it's the 7th of June that the
right, it is.
First Sunday.
And we have this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but we will be having a Secret Doctrine webinar. And it's the 19th, isn't it, of April?
Yes.
Just coming up in a couple of weeks here. So those of you who participate in both webinars, we'll see you then. Otherwise, consider participating in the conference streams, which will be done via the Zoom platform. And until next time, thank you very much. And bye-bye for now.
Goodbye, everybody. Oops.